This is Booked with Beth, and I am Beth Hildenbrand. And today we have a very special guest who I have been trying to get on this show for a very long time, Mr. Paul Rushworth-Brown. And I have read his book, Outback Odyssey, which is just getting rave reviews. And I'm going to hand the show over to Paul and let him tell us a little bit about himself.
The Australian outback is not just a setting, it is alive, watching, waiting. It holds the echoes of those who have walked its vast expanse for millennia, their stories woven into its rivers, cliffs, and shifting sands. For those who respect it, the land offers wisdom, shelter, and a path forward. But for those who seek only to take, to exploit, and to conquer, it becomes an unrelenting adversary. As Jimmy, Amanda, and their companions journey deeper into this unforgiving landscape, they begin to realize that survival isn't about strength alone. It's about understanding. The land remembers. It whispers through the wind. It marks time in the scorch of the sun and the chill of the night, and it punishes those who ignore its warnings. An ancient mystery lies buried within its heart, and those who seek it must first prove themselves worthy. Because in the outback, the past is never truly gone.
To give you a bit of a background, we had a referendum over here in Australia, back in 2023, and it was the right for First Nations people to actually have a say in Parliament. And so Outback Odyssey is sort of like, first reading it, if you don't read between the lines, if you read above them, it's a historical fiction romance novel. But if you read between the lines, it's an allegorical, I suppose, there's a lot of allegorical symbolism, which basically presents some of the issues that we are having over here in Australia with regards to reconciliation and accepting First Nations people into our nation.
Well, I very much enjoyed the book. It was fascinating to me because I don't know much about Australia. And wow, I learned a lot. And I love a book where I can enjoy the story and learn something at the same time.
Yeah.
So it rang all the bells for me.
Meaning. So deep meaning. And I think my other three novels, they're good sort of like historical fiction, adventure, romance type novels. But this one really means something. And I think it's special.
Well, according to the reviews, you've got other people think so too. An epic journey, captivating tale of adventure and ancient heritage. I mean, you've got some big review titles out there. And having read it myself, wow, I was impressed. It makes me want to go back and read your other novels, certainly. And it's adapted into a screenplay even. So congratulations there.
Thank you.
I was definitely taken in and drawn into this book. It was very well written. The characters were terrific. And it's just, well, it's an odyssey. It really is. It's right there in the title. You did an incredible job with this book. You really did. Yeah. You said you wanted to read us a little. I would love to hear some.
Yeah. So I'm going to, this sort of like first act, because it's basically about a, for your viewers, it's like don't really know the story. It's the story, if we forget about the allegorical concepts and that type of thing, it's a story of a young man 18 years old, that spent most of his childhood in an orphanage. And then obviously turning 18, this is sort of like back in Australia, or then back in England, back in the 1950s. And when he turned 18, obviously they kicked him out of the orphanage, and he tried to join the armed services to make his father proud, and he didn't make it because he was too short. So his next at that point, obviously both his parents were, they died when he was about 12, loosely based on my father's life, to be honest. So he says to himself, well, I'm going to try and get to Australia. So back then in the 50s, they had this, the Australian government put out this scheme called the, it was the migration scheme to sort of like to get as many Brits as they could over to Australia, to keep Australia British. And anyway, I mean, that's another story. I mean, the book is almost like 3 stories, this is sort of like the first part. Anyway, to make a long story short, he comes to Australia. He goes through all the indoctrination of, living in a hostel and being tested for various diseases and all that type of thing. And that doesn't include the trip over, the month trip over here in the book. On the boat. Anyway, so when he gets to Australia, after sort of like going through all the process, they send him out to the Outback to work on a sheep station, and there he basically falls in love with the country, which in the book is actually another character, and a First Nations elder takes him under his wing and basically teaches him about the Outback and how to survive in the Outback, the spirits of the Outback, and I don't want to give too much away, so we'll just leave it there, and I'll just read this excerpt. All right. So in this excerpt, we find Jimmy on the deck of the RMS Orient, right, which was one of the big ships that took immigrants from London through Colombo, through the Suez Canal to Melbourne back in those days. And he sort of like has a moment of quiet reflection. It's the beginning of a journey, and he's basically leaving his whole life that he'd known up till then behind. So Jimmy stared at the RMS Orient, a floating marvel on the brown, murky waters of the River Thames, Australia's main emigration point. Its colossal shape dwarfed other floating craft. Moored nearby, from his reading, her corn-coloured hull and white upperworks featured promenade decks, sliding glass doors, and sliding walls. He was impressed by the sight of the enormous smokestack and one colossal mast. The interior was bathed in chromium and adorned with bakelite fittings. She exuded a sense of airiness and spaciousness. As Jimmy embarked, the ship groaned, and the hum of the engines reverberated through the decks. The mooring ropes squealed their displeasure as they strained against the bollards. The creak of timber and the scream of foghorn sounded a warning to passengers, families, and loved ones dockside as they waved and shouted their goodbyes. While walking to the port side, Jimmy waved, not to his loved ones, but to England.
That's a good moment.
Yeah, it's sort of like it almost makes, for me, writing this novel, it was because I was born in England. And I didn't, my father left to come to Australia when I was about 9. And I didn't see him again until I was 18.
Wow.
So writing that part of the novel, obviously it's that part of it is very loosely based on my father, but obviously, fictionalized. But it was a bit of a sad thing to write for me. sort of like I suppose stepping into my father's footsteps, and I suppose living the something similar to the adventure that he would have taken back when he was 18.
So you said it's loosely based on your father.
Yeah.
Now, the father thing brings to mind a question about the book. In the book, Jimmy receives a letter at the end. Is there going to be a part 2?
No, you'll have to wait and see, Beth.
Because, okay, you left it there. You left it there for me to wonder. Yeah. And so, yeah. Okay. If there is, you got to let me know, because that I had that question, burning in my brain. Okay. Is there going to be a part 2? Is this going to come up in part 2?
Well, my other 3 books, that was part of a trilogy. So I suppose it depends on how, I suppose, the readers and the public, how they come to terms with this one. If I see that people like Outback Odyssey, there might be a second one.
I would like to see a second one.
How do you think? What do you think where do you think the second one would go? Because I sort of like left that letter.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
I don't want to give it away. I could see something arriving on the doorstep, like, surprise.
Well, to be honest with you, that surprise was me in real life.
And I was wondering, when you said that, I was like, okay. That's what made me think of it. Because when I read the book, and I kept thinking the whole way through, that was kind of left open there. And I wonder if we're going to see this, at some point. And then when I saw the letter at the end of the book, I was like, okay, now I have to wonder. Yeah. And then when you see the letter and you think, okay, is there going to be a part 2 to this? There's got to be a part 2 to this, because, we saw this. Okay. Yeah. And now everybody's going to wonder what the hell I'm talking about, but I can't give it away. I refuse to give spoilers. Even in my reviews, I will not give spoilers. Yeah. And this one's getting a big 5 stars, by the way.
Thank you.
I would love to see you do something with that in the future.
There's some real sort of like crucial and poignant parts to that novel, from not only a personal point of view, but for also I suppose because Australia is going through this time at the moment where we're as a nation, we're like really trying hard to I suppose go through that reconciliation period. But it's so difficult because I suppose some people are hesitant. I think they're scared. And through the research that I did for this novel, and also spending a lot of time in the Outback over a number of years. I mean, when I first came to Australia, I hitchhiked all through the Outback when I was about 19. Slept at the side of the road. You can't do it anymore, but stood on top of Uluru, which is the new word for Ayers Rock, and spending. Even worked out in the Outback, on I was a navvy on the railways, and we used to replace all the broken down tracks, in 50-degree heat. So I was very in tune with what was going on out there. Yeah, well, one of the main points that comes through the novel in a very delicate way. I mean, the novel, I think, doesn't preach. It just goes through its fiction. It goes through its romance. It goes through its cultural First Nation aspects, but it doesn't preach about anything. But one of the main points that does come out in a very, very subtle way is the story about the stolen generation. And Americans probably don't know about that, but what happened back in sort of like the, from about I think it was like the late 1800s to later on in the up until the sort of like early sort of like 20th century, is that Aboriginal children were taken away, or sorry, I shouldn't use the word Aboriginal, we use the word First Nations now, but First Nations children were taken away from their family and actually put into hostels and church orphanages to basically make them white. They weren't allowed to speak their language. They weren't allowed to use their own First Nations names that their parents had given them, and because of that, and what a lot of people outside Australia don't know, or even in Australia don't know, is that First Nations in Australia, people just call First Nations people, or they used to call them Aborigines, right? But Australia was actually broken up into 1,000 different countries, and every First Nations nation had its own country, right? So some of those nations would speak different language, they'd have different customs, they'd have a whole different cultural background.
I learned that from your book. We have questions here.
Yep.
If you could meet any of your characters, what question would you ask them?
Probably the antagonist, Derek, right, who is Amanda's uncle. I'd basically say, I mean, obviously he had mental health issues, right, and that's sort of like another strong theme that sort of like comes out in the novel, and which is a sort of like a real issue out in rural areas in Australia, especially among young men. I would ask him, why didn't you seek help? And of course they didn't back then. Why did you treat your niece so poorly? Why did you? Why couldn't you just support her and be part of her life? I have to be careful not to give too many hints away.
I wanted to ask you about Mr. Olsen.
Yeah.
He was like my favorite character in this book. I don't know why, or at least one of my favorites. Just the interaction between those two characters. I really enjoyed that. He was he was almost like a mentor to him during that period.
Yeah.
And, just showed him that there were things beyond what he knew during that time.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know. I just really enjoyed that part of the book.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I enjoyed the whole book, but there was something special about that time between the two of them.
Yeah. I mean, the land was probably the character that I love writing. It's a definite character, and it plays such an important part in that in the novel.
And I love how you say that the land was a character, because it really was.
Yeah.
And you really brought that out in the book. And like when he goes to the to do his thing and become a part of the, what did you call it, a mob?
Yep. So mob's like a tribe.
Yes, that's something else I learned.
Yeah.
And he just kind of gives himself over to it, and you learn that the land is its own being.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is its own person.
Yeah.
And I just love how you did that. It was something special.
Yeah. Well, to First Nations people, every rock, every tree, every animal is a part of the land, and it's almost like, and so like going back to the stolen generations, when they took those young kids from their home, from their country, it's almost like taking, I suppose, a Catholic person or a Christian person away from their church. Now that's how it's like how they hold the land and the rocks and the streams and the rivers and the animals. It's they all have they're all tied to the dreaming, and they're all tied to their culture, and all very heavily tied to their being.
I'm fascinated by this. I'm going to have to keep reading about this now. You have me hooked. You really do. I'm going to have to go to Australia. Me, who won't get on a plane. Now we have to talk about, you are one of the decade's most important historical works. This was called.
Was it?
Yes. I got that out of your press kit.
My daughter is my publicist, so she sort of like takes care of all that and writes the articles and puts the press kit together and the pitch deck for the screenplay and that.
Well, she does a fabulous job.
So this one is basically Jimmy's arrived in Australia and is being guided by his First Nations elder. And in Australia, if there's an elder, we call them auntie or uncle, which you probably would have picked up from the novel. So his uncle Jarrah, and using the word uncle or auntie is more out of sort of like respect, aunties. And this scene shows how Outback Odyssey honours First Nations culture and how Jimmy learns to listen to country, right, and its spirits. So the men gathered around, wrapped in possum skin cloaks, and started to chant. Jarrah mixed ochre and animal fat and painted a curved line like a wallaby's tail on his forehead. The wallaby is your totem and will always walk with you, Jarrah said with his gravelly voice. Jimmy thought of Jen Lee, the injured wallaby he had rescued. His totem was fitting. Tonight, you will see its spirit and learn its wisdom. Jarrah explained, wiping red and white ochre on his chest, representing the mob and dreamtime stories. You must remember the patterns of the painting, as they contain stories, messages, and spiritual meaning. When you return to the village, the final part of the initiation will be with friends, elders, and your new family. The chanting grew louder, and the men threw eucalyptus leaves into the fire. Jimmy inhaled and closed his eyes. He felt calm, eventually entering a dreamlike state. That night, he imagined Jen Lee standing before him, speaking, "I am your totem, the spirit of our people, strong and in balance. From today, you carry my spirit and the duty to care for the land and all living creatures." When Jimmy opened his eyes, the fire was reduced to glowing embers. He didn't know how much time had passed, but he felt sweaty and groggy.
I loved that part. I did. Because he saved the baby wallaby.
Yeah.
And then that became his spirit animal.
Yeah.
So yes, I loved that part.
Yeah.
And he was never allowed to eat wallaby or
right.
kill wallaby.
Right. Yeah.
He had to protect the wallaby. Yes. Yeah. So that was one of my favorite parts of the book.
Yeah.
I was so happy when he saved the baby wallaby.
Yeah.
Because they were out hunting. Yes.
Yeah. You got in trouble because the way First Nations people see it is that it's all about balance, and obviously they live they live off the land, and if there was an opportunity to hunt a wallaby and eat it, then they take it, and it's all a cycle.
But he wanted to protect the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good part of the story. I liked that part.
So what was your favorite part of the story? You've already said that that you liked Mr. Olsen. I mean, Mr. Olsen, he was like a character, I suppose, born out of, sort of like old movies, that I used to watch. Casablanca and all that type of thing.
I would have to say my favorite part of the story is at the cave but I can't say any more than that, or I give too much away. I think I like that scene because it really it brings the balance that the whole book talks about. It is that scene.
Yeah. And you'd never pick it, would you?
No. I mean, it's and it ends the way it's. I mean, it brings about everything the way it should be.
Yeah.
I mean, you wrote it perfectly.
The story is actually closely tied to Martin Weiberg's Gold. All right. And Martin Weiberg was a carpenter working on the SS Avoca back in still like the early 1800s or mid 1800s, and he actually stole some Colombian sovereigns and took them off his ship and hid them. This part of the novel marks the beginning of a quest, a discovery that changes everything. Amanda and Jimmy unearth a long-buried secret about the gold and the promise of treasure, mystery, and obviously the new dangers that lie ahead. And their journey begins to shift from a search for gold to something much deeper. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So basically, Amanda at this point is just confronted by her uncle, which the antagonist still like wants the gold and he wants her station. So with the rifle still in her hands, Amanda stood on the veranda, the rain pouring on her. The storm was in a frenzy, and she watched it stampede across the land. Her father's words were in her head. She inhaled deeply and made the storm's energy hers. This was her land now, her legacy. To try to take it off me, you bastard. The next day, Amanda rose early, stood on the veranda looking at the sunrise, and felt hope for the first time. Her uncle's threats had not disappeared, but she knew more than before that she was strong enough to meet him head on if need be. As she looked at the beauty of the outback, its fierce and unyielding spirit, she felt a faint smile tugging at her lips. It was spirit she shared, a resilience forged by the land itself. Strong woman.
Yes, she is. She is.
Yeah.
She was a great character. I mean, she was given a heavy burden, but also she loved her burden, and she wouldn't have traded it for anything in the world.
Yeah.
Because she loved every bit of it.
Yeah.
It was life to her, basically.
Yeah.
Because like you said, it was land.
Yeah.
And she loved the land.
Yeah.
And she was determined. She was a very determined woman. And
I see this movie sort of like taking place in front of my eyes, and all I'm doing is transferring, this movie that's in my head onto paper. And it's such a lovely way to write because, it's. You're almost living in that world. It's almost like you're a god, sort of like, making decisions and changes in the characters' lives.
So, yes, thank you for coming on. I have waited for this one for so long, and I enjoyed doing your show that one time. So,
yeah, thanks. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yes, it was a pleasure to have you. And your book was just fabulous. It really was. I'm so looking forward to part 2.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I'll give you, let's see, you have 1 month. 1 month to come up with the next one so I can read it. How's that sound?